All right, your wedding planning's going great. You're working on your timeline. How long should it take to get into the dress? How much time does it take to put on makeup? What about my hair? How long does my hair take? Well, for you, your creative session's good. You got 2 hours there. Lots of photos and video. Your ceremony is on lockdown. Everything's set. The reception, crap. How much time should a reception be? Well, fret no more. We have the answers. I sit down with some of the leading wedding industry professionals and ask their opinion about how long a reception should be and why it's important. Let's take a listen.
This varies all over the country. In our Midwestern weddings, they usually were 6 hours. So you'd have your cocktail hour, which would be your first hour, and then you have your introductions, kind of formalities to kick off, and then your dinner portion, and then usually about 2 to 3 hours of dancing at the end. That flow, I think it's tradition. That's just kind of what we stick to because that's what we've always known. But I've also done weddings in other parts of the country where it's more of a condensed flow. Or even a longer flow with certain cultures that have multi-day events. There are so many different ways to do it that while in the Midwest 6 hours is your average, I say make it your own.
Most of our weddings are 6 to 6.5 hours, including ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, and dancing. I find that the sweet spot for dancing is somewhere between 2 and 3 hours, and everybody's crowd is a little bit different. If it's a younger crowd or a crowd that loves to dance, maybe they have a little bit longer dance party. We have had clients that want to have a little bit of a cocktail hour before the ceremony and then another cocktail hour because they really like to have cocktail hour. It's more of an informal event. But I do think that, one, to keep costs down, you don't want it to be too long. 2, you have to start thinking about how long are people going to be drinking. Some caterers will put a cap on how long they want to serve somebody an open bar, just for liability reasons and to make sure that your guests are having a good time but still being safe. So 6 to 6.5 hours is the average. Once in a while it can go a little bit longer, but just make sure that you're keeping those things in mind.
I think a lot of the things that take place, really sometimes unfortunately the dancing's only an hour and a half or 2, but you have the dinner and then the toast, all of that happening in the couples, all of these traditional aspects to it, if you choose to incorporate, which about 4 hours I would say for the reception, once the ceremony has concluded, obviously not taking into account that.
Typical reception would go between 5 and 6 hours. Usually the first hour would be the cocktail hour, the next hour and a half would be dinner, and then the last 3.5 hours would be open bar and dancing. Dinners usually last for about an hour and a half because they are catered. Dishes such as your first course, soup and salad, your second course, which would be your main entree, third course could be your dessert, and even in between, we've seen sorbets, we've seen palate cleansers, so it could be 4 or 5 courses. Really all depends on the client. But I've seen dinners go for about an hour, hour and a half.
It's 6 hours, because that's how long it needs to be. It's 6 hours because you need an hour for cocktail hour. You need about a half hour for grand introductions and to get guests in their seats. Dinner is about an hour and a half, so by that time, you're looking at about 2.5 to 3 hours for dancing.
Traditionally, receptions are 5 to 6 hours. I say shorter the better. Yes, you have more to cram in a shorter amount of time, but you're gonna leave on a high note, and you're gonna leave, if you end early, say you end at 11, you're gonna have more guests there at the end. If you go to 12, you're kind of whittling it down to your diehard party animals. Everyone left, End earlier and shorten it. You're gonna thank yourself the next day too.
Yeah, so cocktail hour and reception can usually go from 6 p.m. till midnight. And the reason is you've got your ceremony ahead of time, cocktail hour, let's say 6 to 7 p.m. And then you've got 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. is dinner and introductions and all of these things, not in that order, all of these things that happen. And then open dancing from 9 to midnight. And then you're done and you can go back to the real world, which people don't want to because it's too much fun.
Yeah, so the average reception is around 5 to 6 hours. Eating, the dancing, the toasts, more dancing, obviously drinking in the mix.
So the length of your reception just depends on everything else you have going on. You'll want to incorporate the timing of the bar, how many guests you're having, cocktail hour, the length of the ceremony, dances, speeches, and how long you anticipate those to be taking place. So on average, about 6 hours for a reception, but it can be anywhere, plus or minus.
We still see a mix of like traditional weddings where the ceremony and then the reception, the intro, speeches, cake cutting, but then we also see the newer kind of stuff where it's very condensed. It's what is particularly interesting to you. If you don't want to do a bouquet and a garter and you don't want to spend all, if everybody you roll with is going to dance and then spend more, a lot more time for the dancing. It's got to be geared towards what you want out of the day.
Well, generally the ceremony, if it's going to be at the same place, is going to be a half hour of the actual ceremony, which adds with 15 minutes of prelude music. So if your ceremony's at 6, the musicians are going to start playing at 5:45 till 6:30. Typically, cocktail hour is, ironically, about an hour. So 6:30 to 7:30. Dinner is traditionally an hour and a half. Now, dinner is not picking up your knife and fork. Dinner is as soon as they open the doors and your guests walk in, that's the beginning of dinner. And usually that is the biggest business aspects of your wedding. Now, if you're having over 250, 300 guests, you may want to consider doing 2 hours of dinner, because it has to include introductions to the bridal party, people giving toasts, cake cutting, blessing over the meal, possibly first dance, father, daughter, mother, son dance, the guests dancing a little bit with the dancing between choruses format. There's also any toast by the two of you, or different anything related to the business aspects of your wedding happen during dinner. Then, so that's an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then the dancing is traditionally 3 hours, which you can extend to 4 or 5, whatever you need. So ballpark, it's about 6 hours.
Receptions are normally 5 to 6 hours long, because you do have to cram a lot of things in, like the dinner, the speeches, the dances, if you are going that like extra traditional route. So you need all of that time plus mingling time for the bride and groom. If you have 250 people at your wedding, think about how long it's going to take to have a small conversation with everyone. So, and you owe that to them. So you got to have enough time, but not too much that it turns into a rave.
We hope this episode of Vendors helps you on your wedding planning. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and to share to make sure you and your fellow planning couples don't miss a single episode. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out our entire conversation in the podcast. You can find all of today's vendors and their contact information in the details below this video. And be sure to check out all of our episodes about these amazing wedding industry professionals. We'll see you next time on Vendors. Vendors is produced and edited by Night Owls Media. More information can be found at nightowlsmedia.com.